when it's dinner time and time's tight.
I just brown some ground beef and have a manwich night.
Mom's working late and you've got to feed 'em right?
We just brown some ground beef and have a manwich night.
15 foods from the 1980s that are popular again. Ah, the 1980s. Think neon colors, big hair, shoulder pads, and the best part, foods that defined a generation. The 1980s brought us some serious fun and sometimes questionable food trends. But guess what? Some of those foods are making a comeback, and you can still get them. Let's talk about 15 foods from the 1980s that are popular again. Number 1. Quiche. The first one on our list, and probably one of the most delicious foods of the 80s, the quiche. This French-inspired egg pie was the ultimate brunch item in the 1980s. It was everywhere. Housewives loved it because it was fancy, but it was easy to make. Over the years, it took a back seat, maybe because it was just a bit too, well, 80s-ish. And now, you'll find quiche in every trendy cafe menu. They just fancy it up with stuff like kale or goat cheese. So if you're craving an 80s breakfast, quiche has got your back. Maybe even throw in some sun-dried tomatoes for maximum 80s effect. Number 2. Jell-O pudding pops. Who remembers these? If you were a kid in the 80s, this was the treat to grab from the freezer. A creamy, chocolatey bite of pure nostalgia. These frozen treats were unique because they had a fudgy texture, unlike any other pop. Sadly, they disappeared for a while as tastes shifted to fruitier frozen treats, so sales plummeted. But now they're back. Well, sort of. It's a sneaky comeback in various dessert forms. They're a little harder to find, but Jell-O has revived them. But hey, if you want the real deal, check out the frozen aisle next time you go shopping. Sometimes the classic just need a cold comeback. 3. Meatloaf. Love it or hate it, meatloaf was the dinner table staple in the 80s. Every family had the best meatloaf recipe ever. And here's a fun fact. One reason meatloaf stayed popular was its adaptability, mixing in breadcrumbs, oats, or even crushed crackers to add texture and flavor. But over time, meatloaf started to feel a bit dated and bland for some. As with most things, economics played a role. Ground beef was a once budget-friendly choice, but as prices rose, meatloaf faded as an everyday lunch option. Interestingly, many think meatloaf's popularity has been more a product of media tropes than actual demand, as it was often featured on TV dinner tables. But whatever the reasons, it's now back in a big way. Meatloaf is getting gourmet makeovers with ingredients like smoked paprika, fancy mushrooms, and artisan breadcrumbs. Despite the variations, it still has the same good old comfort food that made the 80s, well, deliciously homey. Pop Rocks. I mean, can you even think of the 1980s without imagining the crackling explosion of Pop Rocks in your mouth? Everyone was obsessed. Here's some interesting history about it. These tiny fizz crystals were created by accident by the chemist named William A. Mitchell. He was actually trying to make an instant soft drink, but some accidents lead to the best inventions. And we got one of the best candies ever invented as a result. With time, they took a dip in popularity as other candies stole the spotlight, but Pop Rocks never fully left the sweet snack scene. And yes, they're still around today. You'll find them in desserts, cocktails, and even as a garnish on fancy cupcakes, because who doesn't want a tiny candy firework in their mouth? Number 5. Sloppy Joes. If you were a kid in the 1980s, chances are you loved Sloppy Joes. They were messy, saucy, and absolutely delicious. And of course, they became iconic comfort food for many. They became most popular in school lunches as they were an economical choice for many, and ground beef makes for a wholesome and nutritious meal. Many pre-made mixes like the manwich helped them gain more popularity. But as things improved for many Americans financially, they fell out of style for a bit due to their sloppiness. They got a bad rep for being cafeteria food, but they're making a comeback, especially with food trucks and casual dining spots. Some people are even making them with pulled pork or adding fancy sauces, but the core messiness, that's here to stay. Number 6, Capri Sun. Next up, we have Capri Sun juices. They were the ultimate lunchbox flex. No 80s lunch was complete without that silver pouch. Unfortunately, their business practices were not as wholesome as their juices. Capri Sun faced some legal disputes over their high sugar content and false advertising of their juices' quote, all-natural status. They're still around, and they now have actual organic versions and new flavors like mango peach. The drink pouch hasn't changed a bit though. You're still going to struggle to get that straw in without poking out the other side. That's a shame. Fruit roll-ups. Alright, who remembers peeling a fruit roll-up off the wrapper in one smooth move? That was peak skill in the 1980s. The 80s were big on sugary, sticky treats, but they faded as snacks got healthier and people became more responsible consumers. General Mills originally released them with various colors and flavors that left kids' tongues dyed for hours. In the 2000s, they even came out with punch-out shapes to add some extra fun. And now they're making a comeback with wild flavors and even some TikTok hacks. Some people even freeze them to make a crispy snack. One great way to make the 80s meet modern internet life, I'd say. But hey, they're still as sticky as ever. Number 8. Doritos Nacho Cheese. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Doritos never really went away, but in the 80s they were huge. And recently, the OG nacho cheese flavor is having a full circle moment. People are putting them on burgers, using them as taco shells, and adding them to nacho platters for that true retro flavor. Chances are you already have these in your regular diet. What can I say? Some snacks are just timeless. Number 9. Deviled eggs. Let's talk about a true retro classic, deviled eggs. These little guys were a hit at every 80s party. They're creamy, tangy, and often topped with a sprinkle of paprika or a little pickle slice for that fancy touch. Actually, deviled eggs have been around since ancient Rome, but they became especially popular at 80s gatherings for their simplicity and sophistication. They fell out of popularity due to two things. One, people shifted to lighter snacks at parties, and second, they had gotten a reputation for being a picnic snack. They didn't stay as fancy as they originally were. Believe it or not, they're now back in style. You'll see deviled eggs on trendy restaurant menus with toppings like avocado, bacon, or sriracha for a modern twist. But deep down, they're still the same nostalgic bite-sized treats that made the 80s gatherings way more delicious. Number 10. Chex Mix. Chex Mix was basically the original party snack. It was crunchy, salty, and loaded with flavor. Fast forward to now, and there are gourmet Chex Mix varieties like cheesy pizza, honey nut, and honey barbecue. It became the original DIY snack mix after Chex released recipes in the 1950s, but it hit its stride in the 80s as the ultimate party snack. The original recipe had Worcestershire sauce, garlic, and seasoned salt mixed into different crunchy textures. Today, the traditional flavor is still the best, and they also have a slightly more savory, bold flavor even now. I think Chex Mix is a perfect snack for binge watching your favorite 80s movies. Number 11. Bagel Bites. Who remembers yelling, "Pizza in the morning, pizza in the evening"? Bagel Bites were a quintessential after-school snack in the 80s, and they're still around. They were created by two entrepreneurs from Florida, Bob Mosher and Stanley Garczynski, who started selling them to local stores. Eventually, they sold the recipe to the major food company Heinz, who is known for its ketchup. Today, people are making gourmet versions of Bagel Bites with fancy cheeses, fresh basil, you name it. But the best part is there's still mini pizzas on a bagel, and we'll never outgrow that, I hope. Number 12. Eggo Waffles. Eggo waffles were the packaged snacks closest to a homemade waffle. These golden, crispy waffles made breakfast in the 1980s a total joy, and they still do today. They've been around since the 1950s, but they really took off in the 80s, thanks in part to the Lego My Eggo slogan. Nowadays, they're still around with new flavors like mixed berries, chocolate chips, buttermilk, and more. In fact, they also have a mini pancake variety, but the classic plain Eggo, it's still the winner. Number 13. Fruit Loops. And the Fruit Loops, the colorful, sugary cereal that made every breakfast feel like a party. The 80s were all about bright, eye-catching foods, so Fruit Loops fit right in. While they lost popularity as healthier breakfast options emerged, they're still available today. Millennials love them as kids, and now they're buying them for their kids, and maybe even themselves. There's an all-new pink Fruit Loops box in rainbow sherbet flavor. So if you want to relive the 80s breakfast hype, just grab a bowl and let the sugary nostalgia kick in. 14. Twinkies. Now let's see Twinkies by Hostess. These creamy-filled cakes have been around forever, but they had a big resurgence in the 1980s. They became a pop culture icon starring in movies like Ghostbusters. And yikes, they survived even the Hostess bankruptcy scare in 2012. And now they're still making rounds. People even deep fry them at fairs because, you know, America. Whether fried or fresh out of the box, Twinkies will always be the snack that just won't quit. 15. Ranch dressing. Last but definitely not least, let's talk about ranch dressing. The 80s were practically the golden age of ranch, you know. People put it on salads, veggies, pizza, you name it. Originally developed in the 1950s, Hidden Valley Ranch quickly grew in popularity and became the go-to dip and salad dressing. In the 80s, people were putting ranch on everything from pizza to wings. Now ranch is everywhere again, from chips to dips to flavored popcorn. Papa John's Pizza never gave up on it anyway. And it's also making a huge comeback in flavors from jalapeno to avocado. There's even a ranch ice cream from the brand Van Leeuwen, if you're feeling really brave. The 80s may have invented ranch mania, but we've definitely taken it to the next level. And there you have it, 15 foods from the totally tubular 80s that are back and still delicious. So what do you think? Are these foods back in your pantry or freezer? Which ones are you trying out? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this little 80s food trip, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to stay in the loop. Now excuse me as I go and prepare some sloppy joes for tonight.